Andrew, can you help define for me a word I think we all think we know what it means, but maybe not? What is tribalism?
Great kickoff question, Josh. In the sense that I am using it, it is being reflexively tribal or reflexively groupish. So, one of the criticisms that I get on the book occasionally is, isn't there such a thing as good tribalism? And the answer is absolutely yes. When you want to come together and form a community with people, that's great. I actually think that we're living in a very alienated, isolated period of history, and so for people that are able to forge communities, I'm all in favor of that. When I say tribalism, um, in a political sense, it would be partisan. We could make a distinction between being partisan versus being an ideologue. So, one of my friends has a love hate relationship with libertarians, and she said they're the most tribal people there are. Like they always want to like talk about libertarianism, and I was like, they're not tribal. They're ideologues. Like
Right.
you could definitely get mad at them for being unyielding, uncompromising purists. Like sure, but they're not forming ranks around a group of people regardless of what they think. They're forming ranks around what people think.
It
I
may
think
be fair to say libertarians are the least tribal people I know.
I would tend to agree. I would say very very ideological,
Yeah.
extremely ideologue oriented, but not particularly tribal. So there's a good version of tribalism, and I think a lot of the bad tribalism is resulting from a decline in the good tribalism. It's my theory that as traditional forms of community, traditional forms of belonging, and finding meaning in life have declined in the American experience, and I think in Europe as well. That kind of the last man standing has been politics, and so
Hmm.
people that would otherwise find a sense of group identity in the Elks Lodge or the Steelers or whoever, they're increasingly turning to politics. And I think politics makes for a really, really bad substitute for community, religion, and everything else.
Had you read, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, former Senator Ben Sass's book, Them?
I started reading it. I didn't finish it. I don't remember why, but I liked what I read so far. It
Okay.
seemed it seemed very much in sync with kind of a Robert Putnam analysis of American
Yes.
society.
Well, I was curious if you didn't finish for the same reason Jonah Goldberg didn't, which is much to his chagrin. He found out it was not, in fact, a book about giant ants that invade Lower Manhattan out of the 1950s monster movie Them,
Uh huh.
but was in fact about similar to this. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I recall the end of that book. It was like the last chapter title said something to the effect of "We need more tribes." And I'm curious to what degree you think, if we can agree that, and throughout your book you mentioned, look, it's maybe some humans can, but it's not realistic or reasonable to suggest, well, let's just do away with tribes, full stop. That we're wired to be within these close knit communities. Do you think is it a combination of quantity and quality? Because I know in Putnam, for instance, isn't that's the bowling alone, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't
Right.
think a lot of people are arguing the great bedrock of American morals comes from bowling leagues, but there is some value to a bowling league, and if more people were involved in bowling leagues, maybe that'd be helpful. So, is it a little of each, or are you more concerned about the quality of our tribes, or just the lack of quantity of tribes?
That is a great question. I think both. I think that the one begot the other. So the lack of, I think, as I said earlier, that the kind of decline of tribal membership, tribal identity, whatnot, has lent itself to politics being the last man standing, and so politics has taken on all of these roles that it shouldn't and is ill-equipped to do, and it becomes partisan, and partisanship becomes a kind of proxy religion for people. So I think that that is caused by the decline of the number of tribes, and it would be better to have more tribes. In terms of the quality, there are qualitative things that are exacerbating it that I would want to change. I think that there's just some kind of fundamental human psychology that people are unaware of that makes the quality of their tribe worse. So, kind of basic in-group out-group identity, and I see this all the time. I see it particularly in politics, but really it applies to any group. You could look at this. I would imagine, I'm not a sports guy, but I would imagine that this would probably apply to sports teams. Applies to religion. It applies to nationalities. Our team, whatever we are, our tribe is a group of polyglot individuals that are barely holding it together because we have such distinctive personality types. It's amazing that we even form a fraternity.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, Kappa Delta across the hill, they're a bunch of monolithic myrmidons. And while we're squabbling between ourselves, they're drilling right now to kill us. They're practicing marching. Everybody kind of thinks that way. So if you're a Democrat, you look at the Republicans as this monolithic entity that is more ruthless and more competent than your team, which is under existential threat, and vice versa from the
Hmm.
Republicans. You look at the Democrats, and you're like, they all think the same, they're all the same, and the perception there that's happening is we can see the fault lines in our own group because we're in the group, and we can see the individuation, we can see the nuance that's going there. We're unaware of it with the other team. If you're a Republican by background or by inclination, you're like, who are the Republican cliques? And you're like, oh, there's the neocons and there's the populists and there's the religious right, the libertarian. You can outline everybody, and you can explain like, oh, well, that guy, he's a paleo conservative.
Hmm.
And if that's where you live, you're probably not used. You don't know what the Democratic fault lines are. You kind of do, but you don't really know, right? So they look very similar, but there's massive distinctions between Jared Polis and Elizabeth Warren. There's really big distinctions between Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and Joe Biden. You may not vote for either of them, but there are differences there, right? There are also qualitative differences in terms of just how we comport media. My full time job is in political satire and in podcasting. I host a show called The Political Orphanage, and I try to do a good job on that front, but a lot of people aren't. A lot of the time, it becomes a kind of entertaining version of the other team is an existential threat who's going to kill you, and that I think lowers the quality of that tribal membership. I'm a fan of Thomas Sowell, and Thomas Sowell has a great quote where he says, "There's a I'm paraphrasing here. There's a big difference between thinking somebody is in error and thinking they're in sin." And I
Hmm.
think that politics is best approached from the former, where I have a lot of friends that vote very differently than me and think very differently than me. I don't think they're bad people. I think their intentions are good. I think their policies are really stupid, and I will fight them on those policies because there are lives and livelihoods at stake. But I don't think the person's bad. I think that they're good and they have a flawed analysis. I would hope that that's how they'd look at me. That they would look at me and go, Heaton really wants to help poor people, and he has really screwy neoliberal ideas to do it, but his heart's in the right place. If we're doing that, we can at least have a conversation about what works and what doesn't work. If we get into that bad tribalism, that bad partisanship, then it just turns into this grudge match of we worship Ahura Mazda and you worship whatever the evil god is in Zoroastrianism. I can't remember it. You are willfully perverse. You have willfully decided you want bad things for people and you need to be snuffed out. And it's very difficult to share a country with people that think that you're an existential threat.
Yeah, as we are finding out more and more with each election cycle, it seems. And I
Do you
am,
think I do feel like it kind of broke this last election cycle? I feel like 2016 was actually far more apocalyptic than 2024. What do you think?
well, I certainly think 2024, because I've maintained this from the beginning, the same thing in 2020. I'm less concerned with who wins this than we all agree who won. And I was very grateful that we could all agree Trump won in 2024, regardless
Yeah.
of whether or not he thought he should have, rather than a repeat of that. So, no, I think that's fair. And maybe it's, I think we humans, and I'm certainly guilty of this too, we see a problem most clearly when it's in the rear view.
Right.
Um, there's still a lot of animosity, obviously, out there. But you could be right that this may be something that we're, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that do you mean to suggest that maybe we're in a cooling off period?
No, I mean I think it's getting worse in general, but I
Okay.
just anecdotally 2016 felt like a qualitative shift for me. Like twenty
Ah.
sixteen, at least personally in my life, prior to Donald Trump running for office, I was living in New York, but I was working at Fox Business. And before Trump won, I would go out and hang out with other comedians. That was what I would do at night. And the attitude was like, look at this wacky guy who like he quotes Milton Friedman, what a loon. And then Trump won, and I wasn't a Trump guy. I didn't support Trump.
Hmm.
I've taken multiple career stands in opposition to Donald Trump. But when Trump won, man, did that change. That like a lot of those same people that thought I was the wacky neighbor began to go, well, he's kind of a proto fascist. He's like Heaton is. He's on probation, but we got to keep our eye on him. And I was like, what? Like, I'm the exact guy I was like 3 weeks ago, but
Yeah.
everybody went into fight or flight mode. I found, at least in New York, and I think in a lot of part of the country. I think with 2024, maybe just Trump was not an unknown
Yeah.
anymore, and also I think the Democrats had much more reconciled themselves to defeat this time. Like I was at both the Republican convention and the Democratic National Convention,
Hmm.
and the uh, the the Republican convention, Biden was still running, and Trump had just been shot, and it was like game
It
over.
was it
Like
was a high
everybody was
point.
like,
Yeah.
"That's it, that's it." Like my Democratic friends were like, "Yeah, like, we've probably lost the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, the presidency for like 3 generations. We just gaslit the country on Biden not being senile. He is. We lied, huh?" They were aware of it. They were making peace with it. Then Kamala came in, and they were like, "Maybe,
We got a
maybe."
shot.
But there was at least this awareness that maybe that, okay, they were probably going to lose. Whereas I think 2016, it was such an unforeseen thing that everybody got caught flat-foot. All that being said, though, I do think it's getting worse overall.
Hmm.
I am not happy by this. I wrote the book to try to mitigate against that, but I think that the partisanship is increasing. You're seeing higher and higher levels of effective partisanship. So there's ideological partisanship, which is where you and I increasingly disagree. I think that we should have tariffs. You are a free trade guy, and we just increasingly go on another ends of that spectrum. That's ideological polarization, which weirdly is not that high. I talk in the
Yeah.
book about the works of Morris Fiorina, and it's mind blowing when you first encounter it, and it feels very unintuitive. But the data's there. In terms of what we think about things, we're actually not particularly polarized compared to any period since the 1960s on. The difference is that we're much better sorted. You had
Hmm.
conservative Democrats and you had liberal Republicans. You had a lot more moderates in both parties, and now it's become much more homogenous in both. So they appear that way, but individuals are not. What has increased is effective polarization. And effective polarization is not what you and I think, it's just how we feel about each other. I hate Josh. Doesn't matter what he thinks. In fact, I'm going to think the opposite of what Josh thinks because I hate Josh so much.
Hmm.
That is on the rise and has been. And maybe it dipped down a little bit in 2024 compared to 2016. I hope so. I would love it if for some reason we all went nuts in 2016 and we just kind of go back to kindness and generosity over the rest of my life. That would be very pleasant. It doesn't seem to be where the tectonic plates are drifting to.
I appreciate you elaborating on that because that does make a lot more sense. And I dare say that I think while I share your general insights as to um, the post 2016, post 2024 differences, maybe, um, it also probably depends on where you're at in the country and who your
Yeah.
circles are. Because I check out the Political Orphanage. Excellent podcast. Listeners here should check that out. And I remember, I want to see, is it which podcaster group? I cannot keep track of the number of podcasts or organizations you're a part of, but is it the We're Not Wrong? Is that the
Yeah, I do. So the Political Orphanage is my show, and I probably shouldn't have even called it the Political Orphanage. I should have called it like the Idea Orphanage or something, because it's actually not that political. I really don't get into politics a whole lot. But on We're Not Wrong, I play a pundit. So Political Orphanage, I am an idea butler. I'm headmaster. We're Not Wrong. I'm a pundit, and there are two other friends that are punditing with me.
Yes, and on that one, We're Not Wrong. One of your friends, one of your pundit co-hosts or co-pundits, I remember even asked the question, Heaton, are you okay? I think it was shortly after one of
Yeah.
the RNC or DNC where you had given a plea for, couldn't we just all get along and stop
Yeah,
tearing each other
that
apart? So
I was getting flashbacks. I remember that. That was at the DNC,
yeah,
and it wasn't bad. It didn't end up being bad, but I
yeah,
was I was just getting flashbacks from 2016 because I did an episode on Tim Walz and did what I try to do on the Political Orphanage. I endeavored to have an interesting insight and just to be as honest of a broker as I can be. I don't claim I'm not objective. I'm not claiming I'm objective. I'm not neutral. I'm not claiming I'm neutral, but I am trying to be even handed and transparent and honest in my analysis. And I'm not
sure.
reflexive. So I don't just swing for Republicans or Democrats or libertarians. I really do try to orient, right? So I did that on Tim Walz. And it wasn't even particularly mean feedback. It was patrons just grumbling. But basically there were some people that were like, how dare you insult this great man? And then there
Hmm.
were other people that were like, you limp wristed cuck. Just say that he, and I, you know what, after that episode, I think both people reached out to me and they were like, hey, sorry, like, you're fine. I love you.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just that 2016 just broke me. Like, I
yeah.
mean, I was in New York City. I think it did matter where you were. And in New York, there was just a year where like I was persona non grata for dating purposes. Just like all women in New York City were like, "You are a progressive Democrat who loves Elizabeth Warren, right?" And I'm like, no. And they're like, "Well, you should die alone. You should hang yourself." And I'm like, "Where is this coming from?" So this last election, when anybody started like when I started getting flack from both sides, which I think generally is a pretty good sign that you're being an honest broker,
Yeah.
I panicked. It was like, oh God, it's happening again. It happened to my old bosses on Capitol Hill. I worked for Blue Dog Democrats. They've all been shot. They went extinct. Like they were like the middle of the most dangerous place. So I freaked out. But no, I'm okay. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard this a bit, but shortly after the 2016 election, Jim Gaffigan even made the comment about he just looked like a Trump voter walking around New York City. Everybody looked at him like he did it. It's like I didn't do it.
Yeah. No, well, that it's one of the things I talk about in the book. There are these tribal signals that you give off that are independent of what you think about things. There's a great economist I'm a big fan of named Arnold Kling. I'm actually going to interview him next week. But Arnold Kling wrote a book called The Three Languages of Politics that have been very informative for me. I talk about them in the book a lot, and I do additional research as well. But he postulates, and I think that social sciences are in agreement with him that accents are not random. They are a feature, not a bug. They're part of the evolutionary mechanism of mankind. It's fascinating stuff, kind of independent of politics. Languages become mutually unintelligible to their speakers in about 1,000 years. So, like Greek has been around forever, right? There are 3 or 4 variations of Greek, and they're all mutually unintelligible to each other because too
Hmm.
much time has elapsed. Same
Hmm.
as like English, Old English, and Middle English. We can't understand each other, even though there's a through line there. The reason that those accents are happening is, again, not random. It's not a random mutation. It's that during the 200, 300,000 years that we were in our evolutionary adolescence in Africa, it appears that it was much more advantageous for you to immediately be able to spot an outsider and identify them and then either fight them or run away than it was to be able to communicate with them. Today, way better to communicate. Like if we all could just naturally pick up language, I mean, we basically can with our phones now, right? But now it's great because I can do trade with you. I can hit on you. We can have an interesting conversation. We can go to a bar. All great, right? It sure looks like during our formative years, tribes were very hostile to one another and they were apt to be immediately offensive if you encountered them. And so accents mutated as an evolutionary feature so that you rapidly could tell who was in your group and who was in the out group right when you met them.
Hmm.
Or when you heard them over a hill. And part of the effect of that now is we still have that politically. Like, you and I are both from Oklahoma. As we discussed before the podcast, I sound like a twit from the East Coast, but I'm from Oklahoma. I'm from Edmond. I went to OU. I worked on a ranch for crying out loud. I'm from Oklahoma. I don't sound like I'm from Oklahoma. More importantly, I sound like a Republican. Now I'm an independent. I lean
Mm-hmm.
libertarian. I do not know how I'm going to vote in any given election. It's not a hold my nose thing where I'm like, I'm an independent, but I know I'll vote Republican. I really don't know how I'm going to vote election to election. I voted for Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians. It really does depend on who I think is going to be most effective at pursuing what I think the country should do. And I sound like a Republican when I'm in New York City. I first of all, I'm a baritone. I talk in this register. Um, this is a broad generalization that I'm about to say, but if I talk more up here like this, it would be more presumed that I'm probably a Democrat. I might be from the East Coast, from the Northeast, and I'm
Hmm.
a little bit more, but I don't. I talk here. I'm a baritone. And also, I don't say justice. It's just not a part of. I grew up in Oklahoma. We don't say justice a lot. We only say justice when we're talking about criminal justice. Like that's it. Justice is the law. But I am incredibly concerned about homelessness. I literally just wrote a check for $2,000 to Community First in Austin, Texas. They're a wonderful organization that helps rehome people in a tiny house village. I actively give thousands of dollars every year to try to alleviate homelessness. I just don't call it housing justice. And as a result, if people are talking to me, they hear me and go, he sounds like a Republican. He doesn't say justice a lot. I should say justice more, but I don't.
So, and this is, I think, a very interesting insight in your book. You talk about this because we talk about this a lot, particularly on the right. You can't say homeless. You're supposed to say the unhoused, right? There's all these shibboleths that allow people to identify you as part of the elite woke culture of the left,
Right?
say.
Yeah.
And I think that is real, but I think there's an aspect of that in which it is, I'm trying to think how to put this, almost deliberately manufactured in order to create this niche group. uh,
Yeah.
While in reality, all humans do this. All humans create sort of their way of speaking or their accents to signal to the other person, hey, we're part of the same group.
Yes, I think you're right on both counts. There's an element of premeditated spin that goes into political terminology. I think the last few years, rightly, we have been scrutinizing woke jargon
Yeah.
because it's Orwellian and irritating as hell,
And
uh,
funny sometimes.
and funny sometimes. Yeah, like Josh, one of my dear friends in New York. I love her. She's a dear friend of mine. Started saying birthing humans instead of pregnant women, and I was like, "Look, I am willing. I'm willing to change some of my vocabulary. If you can make the case to me that the thing I'm saying is truly offensive, or it's out, I'm open. I'm open. I'm not going to call pregnant women birthing humans because I'm not an alien overlord breeding humans in a pit. Christ. Yeah, there's a certain amount of spin there. What I tend to get flack on is people will get mad at me for saying illegal alien.
Hmm.
I am very much in favor of immigration. I am not with the populists or the nativists on this one at all. I am one of those neoliberal cucks that is not quite for open borders, but would love to get there at some point. Like I'm unabashed about it, right? So, but I'm going to say illegal aliens because I feel like saying what is it? Undocumented worker is like tricking you into coming to my position, and I don't want to trick you to do it.
Right.
Like I've had somebody go, well, no one can really be illegal.
Hmm.
Like no human can be illegal, and I'm like, okay, well then call him a national trespasser because that's what we're talking about. We're
Hmm.
talking about trespass, and I think we should make it way easier for people to get in, but they're trespassing. It's against the law. Um, and you can go back to the 90s, like 2000, like No Child Left Behind. I don't want to wail on the Democrats too much, but like there was a comedian that had a great thing about how good conservatives were at spin during like the 2000s, where No Child Left Behind. You want to leave children behind? What's wrong with you? Like,
Right.
or like the Democrats at that time were really stretching to be good at this. Like when we were having the fight over Obamacare, I was on the Hill and the Democrats came up with a public option. I was like, do you really want to call it the? It sounds like something you get in a bathroom. Like, don't call it the public option. Like Medicare for all, like whether you think it's a good or a bad idea, is a way better strategy. Um, yes, there is some spin there, but I think your broader point, Josh, the argot, the shibboleths, those very naturally happen. They naturally happen subconsciously because people are on an evolutionary level. They are constantly differentiating themselves from the other. Teenagers do this. This isn't a political thing, but like if anybody has teenagers, like they'll just like I'm not going to say Riz. I stepped off that bus when sick meant good, and like cool is stupid too. Right? I say cool. That's
Yeah.
why is calling something good that's like good and popular cold? Why is that? I don't know, but that's where I got off. But I'm not going to say sick or whatever. But that's what they're doing is they're creating this new language to differentiate themselves from the old ones. They're not thinking about it. They're just doing it automatically. We did it when we were in teenagers and whatnot. Um, and there are other accents that happen under duress. There's a bit in the book that I talk about where there have been fascinating linguistic studies. The most prominent one of which I'm aware occurred in Martha's Vineyard around 1950. Um, Prior to 1950, Martha's Vineyard was not where all the wealthy people summered. All the sorts of people that use summer as a verb
Yeah.
live in previously it was just a lobsterman village. I mean, it was just a fishing village like Pawtucket or something like that. Um, After the war, for whatever reason, the shipbuilding went away and it became a popular destination for rich people. And that put real pressure on the housing market. The jobs are going away and the housing stock is increasing in price. And this linguistic that was studying it found that at that same time, the regional accent became stronger in guys in their 40s, not for teenagers, not for people in high school, for people that were feeling the brunt of that economic push. Their accent was getting stronger, which flew in the face of all supposition at that time because the general thought process had been, oh, TV's going to get rid of all accents, and maybe it has, but when people are under duress, the accents get stronger. There are prior examples in American history where I think when Minnesota or maybe Wisconsin was settled, people that were of Norwegian or Swedish extract or German extract that had already lived back east, like they were German Americans or Swedish Americans or Norwegian Americans, they would move to Minnesota, they'd meet each other, and then their accents would get stronger
Wow.
because they were encountering an other. And so
Hmm.
that happens. And I think that that happens politically. Is that when we're under duress, when times are partisan, or they're not partisan, they're just economically insecure, or they're scary, or they're stressful, we're more apt to lean into that stuff because on an evolutionary level, we want to immediately know who's on our side, who's not on our side, and we end up, I think, fomenting a lot of these frictures and a lot of these fights needlessly. And so I'm trying to combat that. I'm trying to get it to where if we're going to have a fight, let's make it a good fight and let's make it a productive one.
You and you mentioned a couple of times kind of the evolutionary examples and the beginning of the book. You take a long journey in kind of why are we this way from a biological perspective? Like, what is it that makes us form different accents in language, and why do we see the other and have such a powerful need? And I will say that I think you make a very compelling case. I myself am I mean, I think you had to chart me, I would be on the creationist side of the ledger. That being said, I think I'm also for an evangelical Christian. I'm a weird one because I didn't vote for Trump. I don't feel akin to most of my evangelical brothers and sisters. And I'm way more comfortable with the theory of evolution than your average Christian. Although you do acknowledge in the book that, hey, a lot of Christians are waking up to this. But I wanted to bring this up to you because look, you're from Oklahoma. You know that there's still a fair amount of people out there that the minute you try to explain things, causation through an evolutionary path, you've lost them.
Yeah.
They've immediately written you off. And so I'm just curious: is there a version of your argument? Maybe not the orientation, but is there a version of your argument that works for the person that rejects the entire evolutionary explanation?
Potentially. I mean, I do think the book is largely grounded in that. I am now an agnostic. My back, weirdly, despite being from Oklahoma, my theological bearings are Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah,
Like if I get hit by a bus and it turns out there is a heaven, and they're like, "Hey, good news, you get to come in," I line up with the Greeks, and so that's my background. When I was Christian, when I was Orthodox, and when I was young, I was raised very tepid Presbyterian. I'm pretty sure that my parents picked. I literally think my parents went, "Well, we're not communists, so we have to go to church. And your dad's an attorney, so he's either a Episcopalian or a Presbyterian.
yeah,
That's our social equal." So I was raised Presbyterian. Um, uh, Neither of those did I have a problem with evolution. That's the route that Britain went. To my knowledge, there was really never any strain of Christianity in Britain that saw Darwin and evolution as hostile to
right.
it. They looked at it like the same way of like learning about erosion doesn't mean that God doesn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. I do
By the way,
appreciate.
is that a strictly American phenomenon? You think that Americanized evangelicalism had such an issue? Because I remember in the '90s, it was a huge deal.
I don't think the Catholics have ever had a problem with it. And I don't think
Yeah,
you're going to find huge pockets of Protestantism outside of America that are active at this time. Like if you go to Europe, there are Protestants, but most Europeans are, they're not even atheists, they're apathetic.
yeah,
They're like, I don't know, what do I have to do to not talk about this? So like you can call them Lutheran, but they're not. I mean, like Scotland's like nominally Protestant. I'm in Scotland a lot. Let me tell you, they're apatheists.
yeah.
Um, so I'm unaware of any major clutch. I'm sure that there are because there's a very big, there's a very large ideological range of opinion within Christendom, within Protestantism. Uh, I think that you could still enjoy the book if you think evolution did not occur. The reason I say it is this. I think a weak part of the book is that all of the evolutionary psychology I or anybody else puts forth is inherently unscientific. And what I mean by that is if we were actually using the scientific method to do something, you are going to make a hypothesis and then you're going to test it under laboratory conditions or using available evidence, and you're going to try to disprove your hypothesis. We can't do that with evolution because I can't make a group of Homo sapiens or proto Homo sapiens and then run them
Right.
through 200 million years of it. I can't do it. So anything that we're doing is supposition. I think it can get people in trouble. I think that there have been, while I think evolutionary psychology is fascinating and I do think it explains a lot, I think it can oftentimes be very misused. There have been lots of moments, I think, where when science kind of crept over the horizon, people like me went, and that's why women can't think math.
Yeah.
Because evolution made them to be pregnant and pick up yams, and so science says women can't vote. That kind of thing happens, right? And the thing, like, and they're pulling it out of their ass, and to some extent, I am as well. But I should say I'm not. It's not happening in a vacuum. But what I'm doing is I'm
Right.
looking at where we are right now, and I'm looking at the evidence that we do have of early hunter gatherers and existent hunter gatherers. Then I'm trying to triangulate between that and go, okay, what likely caused that, and if so, how are we geared to operate psychologically? Um, None of that I can scientifically prove, and so I think if somebody went, hey, this is scientifically invalidated because it is ultimately all theoretical, I would go, you got me. It is ultimately all theoretical. That being said, I think all of the takeaways are demonstrable.
Hmm.
So the book's divided into three parts. The first part is all evolutionary psychology. The second part is how did we get here? What made, if tribalism, as I assert in the book, is a constant or is a very strong impulse, like wanting to eat or avoid death or be horny, what changed fundamentally? Well, that's all rooted now. That's something that we can have a conversation with now. And then the last third is, what do we do about it? And I'd even say the first bit in the evolutionary psychology, a lot of it's evolutionary psychology, but a lot of it's just basic social psychology based on stuff that we can observe presently. Like we kicked off in our conversation, Josh, about in-group, out-group dynamics. I mean, that's something that we're learning about now as we're doing it. And there's a lot of other contemporary things there too. I get into the Robbers Cave State Boys, which took place in Oklahoma. I didn't put it in the book for that reason. It just happened to be down in eastern Oklahoma near McAllister.
Hmm.
But there are a lot of things that we can look at. We can go, okay, even if you disagree with evolution fundamentally, you don't think that's the case. Even if you're a strict, this happened 6,000 years ago, we were made as is. You could go, okay, all the same. However, we got to where we are, we appear to be acting and operating in these specific ways, and that bit I think would appeal to everybody.
Well, what I find most interesting is that most of the time, if I'm going to have a disagreement with an atheist or an agnostic such as yourself, it's not in the origin issues, it's in the conclusions they draw from that. And what I find very fascinating is in the book, you and I, in a lot of ways, land in the same places. In that, and here let me just quote directly from the book. You write, humans are in the thrall of motivated reasoning, which is a fancy way to say that we decide what we want first, then employ logic after the fact to justify our decision to ourselves and others. Human beings are not rational. We are rationalizing. We make an emotional decision, then drag logic in to explain our actions, but we almost always believe the causality flows the other way. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because oftentimes what you will hear when these discussions of a strictly biological explanation is, therefore we can overcome this because we now understand how the puzzle works.
Okay.
We have the capacity as humans to sort of rig the system, um, but you employ a much more, dare I say, Hayekian or maybe Burkean view,
Hmm.
of you can't actually escape your humanity.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it and
No,
you
I
talk
agree with
about,
everything you've said so far. Yes, I think
yeah,
that's
you talk
accurate. Yeah.
about religion later in the book because it reminds me much of the conservative. I know you're a libertarian. There's a lot of ways in which you speak. I'm like, he's flirting with conservatism there somewhat, but the the Burkean idea that you need morals, and heck, I think you see this in Hayek too, that it's not just about rationalism.
Yeah.
It's almost like the human mind cannot think through everything logically, so you have to rely on some sort of a moral framework in order to make good decisions.
Hmm.
And so, in order to truly escape the sort of negative excesses of tribalism, is not a matter of just logically thinking your way out of it. It's
Yeah.
rather a way of subjecting your will, if you will, to a moral framework that's healthier, so that you can make good decisions. Does that make sense, or am I
Sure,
are we
I think
are we
so.
similar
There's
there?
several things to unpack there, but yes, I think so. I would say my outlook's pretty Burkean in that regard. Like what immediately strikes my mind is, I think, a very old debate we've been having since the French Revolution is human nature fixed or unbound?
Yeah.
And the Jacobins of the world and the Soviet Union and a lot of very starry-eyed government types that exist today are of the opinion that we can just remake people. Even John Locke, who I'm a big fan of, was tabula rasa, was he not? Like, he thought that people were a blank slate,
Yeah.
and that in many ways is that kind of malleable. Look, if you just raised all kids to believe that sex is bad, that kind of. I do not think that's the case. I think it's like cartilage. where you can maybe move it a little bit,
Hmm.
but it's definitely got defined boundaries, right? And so any system that we want to do needs to start with what is human nature at the core and work out. It's why I'm a capitalist. I'm not a capitalist because I am greedy and I want to take more money. It's because I'm deeply, deeply bleeding heart. I think I very much have a Christian ethic in that regard. Of I want to help the poor. I want to help people. What capitalism does is it goes, look, we're going to take this selfish or autocentric impulse that individuals have aggregately, but when we put it into a market system, it ends up helping everybody
Hmm.
because I the selfish grocer that want to make a buck, am going to do it by selling you cheap goods. And if I can sell even more cheap goods, then I get more money and you get cheaper goods. So that's why I'm for all of that. Um, yeah, I think I broadly agree with it. The other thing I would agree with Josh is I don't think you can think your way out of this. To draw upon a conservative, at least in terms of jurisprudence. I met Antonin Scalia several years ago when I first came here to DC, and I subsequently read his book. And when he's talking about originalism, he says in there at one point, he talks about judges interjecting their own will of what they wish the law was, and he goes,
Hmm.
the system that I'm promulgating cannot inoculate this from happening. Nothing can inoculate you to this, but we can stop from openly exacerbating the problem. And that's very much the approach I'm taking. Like, I wouldn't get rid of tribalism in a broad sense if I had the ability to do it anyway. I don't think people would be happy, and I don't think society would work well if we all became hyper rationalist hermits. That is not the goal. I don't want people to get there. Um, and I don't think that it's a situation where you read the book and then you're never affected by tribalism again. I'm affected by
Right.
tribalism. I have all of the things that I describe in the book are impulses that I have as well. But what I do think you can do is you can to some extent be aware of when you're doing it, and again, you can't inoculate yourself, but you can at least kind of stop excesses of it. You can go, just something that I try to do in my own life is when I start feeling cognitive dissonance, I try to go into it. Cognitive dissonance is a horrible feeling. People really don't like it.
Yeah.
And I would imagine the vast majority of the time I'm not even consciously aware of it and I steer away from it. But in those rare instances where I'm aware I am having a moment of cognitive dissonance, I go, that means there's something here that I'm wrong about, or probably wrong about. So I'm going to try to steer into it. It doesn't mean that I don't experience the cognitive dissonance at all, but it does mean that I can course correct a bit.
That makes sense. I mean, it's similar. I'm a CPA, and I'm an auditor, and we talk about all the time about you are biased. We're all biased. You can't stop that, but you can be aware of it and mitigate against it to a certain degree. I think there are all sorts of. We can't help the fact we're human and we're
No.
fallible. We're going to mess up, but it doesn't mean we're helpless. I guess it just means we can't delude ourselves into thinking we could escape
Yeah,
that.
or like to use the judicial analogy again. You're or maybe let's like I'll pick on legislators for a minute. Uh, you are going to have some impulse to write bills or vote for bills that don't get you in trouble with your friends and family.
Yeah.
To some extent, that is going to weigh in on you. You don't necessarily have to act on, but it's going to be there, and it's probably going to influence you in ways that you don't recognize. Being aware of that, saying, "Yeah, I am human, and I want my Thanksgiving to go well," and that probably is playing in the back of my mind in ways I don't know. That's different than going. Therefore, I am just going to give as much graft as I can to my cousin because we're all going to be criminals about this. Those
Right.
are different tracks.
Right. No, I agree, and and I wanted to ask you about because you mentioned in the book two. Let me see if I get this right here. Two variants, I guess, if you will. If we're talking about religion and its effect on our society, say, or our political discourse, I think that. Oh, here we go. The false agency theory and the big gods theory. And I'll
Yeah.
preface this by saying you do a good job in the book saying, look, I'm not exploring the veracity of religion. I'm not trying to say is it true or isn't it. It's more what is the actual effect it has on us.
Yeah.
Could you briefly sketch for me, because one's a very negative view of religion, one's a very
Yeah.
positive view of religion, that you can hold as an atheist or a theist,
Mhm.
or anything in between. What are those two different views?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you prefaced this. But my editor Michael Boudreau read the first version, and he's like, "You need to put a preface in here because you're going to piss off a lot of religious people." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "I am religious, and I was offended." And I was like, "Really? Okay." So That was it was not the goal at all. So I'm glad that I did
And
that.
to be fair, the way you preface it, so far as I can tell, is not offensive. It's just once you acknowledge,
The
look,
new
I'm not
version,
talking
yeah.
about is this true. I'm just talking about what the
Right.
effect is.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it also helps that, like, I don't know, I went to church about a month ago because I missed everybody at church. I was in Oklahoma for Christmas. I hope you're right, Josh. I hope I'm wrong. I don't want it to be blackness.
Yeah,
like I'm totally okay with being wrong about this, assuming that I don't go to hell forever. And so I'm not particularly militant about this. I'm about as friendly as an agnostic as you can get. In terms of those frameworks, there's lots of different explanations for how religion came about. I think if you're taking a theist route, the most direct version would be God made religion, and our souls naturally yearn for God. Or you could even take a tabula rasa approach and go, look, God told us this thing, and now we're trying to do it.
divine
Um,
intervention almost.
right, divine intervention. I don't know that either of those are actually, as you note, contradictory to the anthropological explanations. In the same
Right,
way that, look, God wants us to have children, and therefore we are horny. Like
right,
there is
right.
an impulse that was put in there, right? So, anthropologically, looking at why religion exists, the two big theories that I explore, the two predominant theories, are false agency and big God theory. So, false agency is more of the Richard Dawkins sign of things. So the idea is that we have overactive imaginations as hominids, that we look into the woods and we think we maybe saw a shape or eyes or something like that. And we project a personality onto something that isn't there, because it was more useful to us from an evolutionary standpoint to be able to um, incorrectly think there's a threat than to not recognize a threat when it's actually there.
Mm.
Richard Dawkins and the others take that further and go, look, this is basically a glitch. It's a glitch in the human mind, and it becomes parasitical. That some miscreant priest says, you know what? Actually, I speak to the sky god. Therefore, you should give me more wives or whatever. And so, in the Richard Dawkins version of things, religion is a mental parasite. In fact, I believe Richard Dawkins wants to classify religion as a mental disorder. He views it as a disease that should be
Hmm.
eradicated. Like, he views it as a public health question. Um, the much more benign version, which is the version that I err to, is the big gods theory. So the big gods theory is that religion is not a glitch nor an accident. It is a pro-social evolutionary strategy of human beings that we've enacted. That uh, you have the bigger your society gets, the harder it is to have social trust, and the harder it is to have to police free riders. If we have a group of 100 people, we don't have to worry about free riders that much because we can just confront them. If Josh
Hmm.
and I are in the same tribe and I'm really slacking off and there's only 100 people, we can just meet by the campfire and go, Heaton, you need to get more yams. Like, you're really slacking off. We're going to kick you out unless you pull your own weight. But if I'm in a group of 20,000 people, maybe I can get away with that, and I can
Hmm.
steal some stuff, right? With with the big gods theory, if all of us really believe there is some supernatural law, there is a force like physics or like disease that exists in some other realm that is watching us, it inclines us to make pro-social behavior, even if no one knows. If no one's watching, we're more inclined to be honest and be scrupulous. We're more inclined to feel guilty about things rather than get away with them, and we can have certain social trust. You see this today with, like, Hasidic Jews in the diamond industry. I don't know a lot about the diamond industry, but it's my understanding that it requires a lot of trust. That it's very easy to screw people over in the diamond industry, and that's partly why it's handled by Hasidic Jews in New York, because they all know each other, and it's like, look, like, we all go to the same synagogue, and, like, if I don't know you, I can call, not on a Saturday, I can call somebody else that, I know Shlomo and he's your cousin. I'm going to talk to him. And there's but probably just the fact that you're another Hasidic Jew, I know that you don't want to be excommunicated from our assembly, and so we can all get along here. So the idea there is that, look, religion didn't happen randomly. And it didn't happen as some sort of horrible quirk. It actually is a pro-social behavior that allows society to scale up, and that's what I think. I think that it is a crucial part of scaling. And I'll add, in an American context, we are really precious with the word religion. in a way that a lot of other cultures aren't. So, like if you go to China, or you go to Taiwan or Vietnam or really anywhere in Southeast Asia, like they don't think of religion as mutually exclusive. We do. Like you're not like a Presbyterian Muslim. That doesn't exist.
Hmm.
But like over in China, they'll be like, well, I'm kind of a Taoist when I go to school, but I'm a Buddhist, for religious purposes. But of course, I pray to Confucius. Like there, it's much more kind of soupy. And I would argue that we are too. It's just that we don't call it religion. Like there's lots of people that believe, or all Hollywood believes, that the point of your life is to find your significant other, your soulmate, and that is your quest. And when
Hmm.
you find your significant other, you will have achieved the purpose, and you will be happy. That is the thing, and it's fated. Fate has designed this person for you to. That's a religious precept. It's not part of Christianity. It's
Hmm.
not in the Bible. I mean, like you can talk about God trying to align you with your mate, but like also Christianity says that it's best to be celibate. So it's not in the doctrine, right? But that's like a religious precept that just happens simultaneously. I would argue that there are lots of isms like liberalism, libertarianism, capitalism, socialism, Marxism, whatever the ism is. Whenever we start talking about abstract concepts, we're using the same muscle as religion. If we want to say that there's such a thing as women's rights or um, uh, Wednesday or anything that's not physical, that is an act of mythologizing, of
Hmm.
saying, hey, there's this level, there's a level of reality that we're all money. Like, right, like every stone sophomore has had this conversation. Like, money's not even real. It's just because we all believe it's real that it's real. Yeah, right. That's yes,
And
that's
think they're
money
the
is.
only one to have ever had that conversation.
Yeah, yeah. That's what money is, moron. Yes, yes, we all agree that slips of paper are worth something. That's how that works. That muscle that allows us to have money and Wednesdays and women's rights and democracy and liberalism, that is, in my view, the exact same muscle that allows us to have religion. And I say that not to disparage religion and say that it's made up like money, but to say that, like, for all the people that hate religion, we don't get to have all the other stuff unless we have the capacity to make
Yeah.
religion. It all comes out of the same anthropological source. It all comes out of that same evolutionary muscle. We were able to come up with religions, therefore, we were able to come up with capitalism, democracy, feminism. Every ism comes from the same source, the same ability, I should say.
Wow, and our time's short, so I'm not going to get into a hole because that is a very interesting thought, the connection or disconnection between religion and isms, if you will. But I as I said earlier, we land in a lot of the same places. I think in that I don't know if it's fair to call Sam Harris someone who subscribes to. I know he's one of the four
Mhm.
horsemen of the atheist, the false agency theory, Doc and Prophets. But I had heard him on Jonah Goldberg's podcast just straight up say if it were up to him, he would prefer to just get rid of religion, full stop. And
Good
that's
luck,
one of those
because the
things that,
Soviets tried that and they sure looked religious to
yeah.
me. Like they were
Well,
worshiping popsicles of their leader and putting people in gulag. Like
yeah.
I think it's a taller order than people are aware of. What I want is pluralism. I want people to be tolerant and pluralistic and go, I'm not going to kill people over an ism. That's what I'm rooting for. I don't
Right.
care if you're a Baptist or a Muslim or whatever. I just want to live in a pluralistic, liberal, in the old sense of the word, society.
Yeah, and I and in all fairness, I don't think Harris is advocating a Soviet Union style
No.
purging, but I think there's this kind of misstep. I think often that people have a presumption. If you take Dawkins' view seriously, it's a glitch. It's a virus. Then obviously be beneficial to eliminate the glitch. But and I'm not going to get it exact. No, G.K. Chesterton talks about um, that there is no historical record of people coming together and agreeing on a social contract.
Right.
Like it's a beautiful political theory, and we can derive a lot of good ideas out of it. But there's no historical record of anybody saying, "Hey, let's all agree to live in ordered liberty." What there is historical records of are people saying we can't hit each other in the sacred place. And you get this sort of religion as a you say pro-social. I wonder if maybe it's not social. Maybe you could say it's almost pre-civilizational in some sense of a necessary building block to get us here. Kind of like I was saying earlier, you have to have those moral formations because we can't just rationalize our way. And now that
Or
I'm
like artificial kinship's another big one, right? So like
yeah
I mentioned that I went to church when I was in Oklahoma, because I still maintain all of those social relationships with the people in the congregation, even though I don't share the same precepts as them anymore. And I have to say, like, religion's phenomenal at doing that.
yeah
I quit going to that particular congregation when I graduated college in 2007. So it's coming up on 20 years now. But I like I'll start crying, Josh. Like at one point, I got fired from a job at a studio. I was doing okay, but that congregation, who know I'm an agnostic, called me and went like, "Are you doing all right? Like, do you need money?"
Mm,
Like I've the same people have checked on me, and like when I first came up to DC years ago, and I was kind of struggling to find my way and stuff, and they went, "We've got a bunch of frequent flyer miles. Anytime you want to come home, just let us know." That's a profound thing, and like religion, I think was part of the scaling of humanity, of going past that 150 person unit where we all know each other individually, to
yeah.
where we would go, all right, you and I aren't cousins, but we both worship the elk god. Therefore, in a way, aren't we all the elk's god's children?
Right.
So we're kind of cousins if you think about it in a really profound way. And so I'm going to treat you like a cousin. I'm not going to do what a chimp would do, which is just attack you because I don't know who you are. I'm gonna extend this presumed kinship there. I think religion's been pretty pro-social. Yeah, I would disagree with Sam Harris on that. I don't think you can remove it without removing the isms. I don't think you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
the ability to construct religion and mythology like um, I use mythology when I talk about mythology in the C.S. Lewis sense of the word, which
Right.
is
Right.
a profound tale. It doesn't
The
mean
Christian friendly mythology.
yes, yeah, like or however you want to put it. Like that mythologizing is how we're able to go like yeah, innocent until proven guilty is a good thing. Like we're not having to calculate every single time. And so I think if you got rid of it, like you would just go Maoist. You'd like there have been lots of attempts where atheists tried to ban religion and they created a religion that was atheistic.
Yeah.
So in the same way that I don't think you're going to get away from tribalism, I don't think you're going to get away from wanting to create a schema in which to interpret the randomness of life in some sort of ordered pattern that gives meaning to you.
Hmm.
That's inbuilt to the human condition. That is, broadly speaking, what I would say religion is, and that's not going to go away. You're just going to become an environmentalist or a Maoist or I don't know whatever the ist is, but you're just going to do it anyway. So I'm not in that camp at all.
Well, I could certainly go round and round with you for quite a while. There's a lot we could talk about, but I know that you've got to get out of here. The name of the book, Tribalism is Dumb, or what was your alternative title? And in the end, we're all just angry lobstermen.
Yeah, that was yeah. There were probably several better titles that I could have come up with. We're all angry lobstermen. There were a bunch I floated out, but yeah, the name of the book is "Tribalism is Dumb," where it comes from, how we got here, and what to do about it, or something like that. But "Tribalism is Dumb" is definitely the main title. And Josh, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming back on the Saving Elephant Show.